I spent 17 years at Hartwell & Briggs, knowing every vendor's direct line, every contract expiration date, and exactly which regional manager at our freight carrier would actually pick up the phone at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not because it was in my job description, because that's what keeping $40 million in annual procurement running smoothly actually looks like from the inside. My name isn't on the building, it wasn't on the press releases, but when something went sideways, a shipment held at customs, a supplier threatening to pull out over a payment dispute, a warehouse fire in Memphis that threatened to derail our entire Q3, my desk phone rang first. Always. That's the kind of person I was at Hartwell & Briggs. The kind you don't notice until everything breaks without her. My direct supervisor, I'll call him my manager, because that's what he was, technically, had been with the company about 4 years when things started to shift. He was the kind of guy who loved a good deck. 40 slides for a 15-minute update, fonts that required an artistic sensibility to appreciate. He once spent an entire Thursday afternoon debating whether a bar chart should be teal or slate blue. I am not exaggerating. I watched it happen through the glass wall of his office. I had been doing my job the same way for nearly 2 decades. I knew our top 3 suppliers personally. I had lunch with the operations lead at our largest carrier every time she came through the city. I had navigated 2 economic downturns, a merger, and a complete overhaul of our ERP system without a single missed delivery to a client. My annual reviews were always the same: exceeds expectations, strong cross-functional relationships, invaluable institutional knowledge. That last phrase, invaluable institutional knowledge. I should have known what was coming when the word invaluable stopped showing up. It was February when my manager called me into his office and told me the company was evolving its procurement approach. He used the word dynamic 4 times in 6 minutes. I counted. He told me they were bringing in someone with a fresh perspective and a background in data-driven supplier strategy. He said this the way people say things when they've already made the decision and are now performing the conversation. Her name was the first thing I noticed on the org chart update. She was 29. She had an MBA from a school whose name I recognized and a LinkedIn profile that used the phrase synergizing operational ecosystems without apparent irony. Her previous experience was 3 years at a consulting firm where, as far as I could tell from her resume, she had advised companies on procurement without ever actually doing procurement. She walked into the office on a Monday morning in March wearing a blazer that cost more than my first car. She smiled at everyone. She had a reusable water bottle with motivational text on it. She rearranged the supply chain team's shared drive on her 3rd day without telling anyone, and then sent a Slack message saying she was excited to optimize our digital workspace. 3 people lost access to files they needed for an active vendor negotiation. My manager thought she was extraordinary. I watched him in meetings, the way he leaned forward when she spoke, the way he repeated her ideas back as if they'd just occurred to him organically. She talked about leveraging data analytics and building a supplier scorecard framework, and he nodded like she was reading from a sacred text. I had been building supplier scorecards since 2009. Mine lived in a spreadsheet that I updated every quarter. They worked. Nobody had ever asked to see them presented in a deck with a color-coded dashboard, so apparently they did not exist. What stung, and I want to be honest about this because I think a lot of women my age know exactly what I'm talking about, was not that she was young. It was that her youth was treated as a credential. Her unfamiliarity with how things worked was reframed as not being constrained by legacy thinking. Her lack of relationships with our vendors was called approaching partnerships with objectivity. Everything I had spent 17 years building was being described, in polite corporate language, as a liability. By April, she had taken over the lead on our 3 biggest supplier accounts. By May, she was running the weekly procurement sync. By June, my manager sat me down and told me my role was being restructured into a support function. Same salary for now. Different title. I would be advising on historical vendor relationships while the new direction was being implemented. I said thank you. I gathered my things. I went to the bathroom and stood over the sink for about 2 minutes. Then I went back to my desk and kept working. Here is something I knew that my manager did not seem to understand. Our relationship with our primary steel supplier, a family-owned company out of Pittsburgh that had been with us for 11 years, was not a contract. It was not a scorecard. It was a phone call I made every 6 weeks to check in with the owner's daughter, who ran operations, just to ask how things were going. It was remembering that they'd had a warehouse flood the previous spring and following up about their recovery. It was being the person who, when their invoicing system glitched and they accidentally double-billed us, called them directly instead of flagging it to accounts payable and letting it become a dispute. Relationships like that don't show up in a dashboard. You only find out they exist when they're gone. July was quiet. August was when things got interesting. The company had landed a significant contract with a regional hospital network, the kind of deal that makes the CEO mention it in the all-hands. It required coordinated deliveries of medical-grade equipment components across 6 sites in 3 states, all on a tight timeline tied to the hospital network's own construction schedule. The procurement piece of it was mine, had been mine since the RFP stage. Then in the restructuring it became hers. I knew our primary supplier for this contract personally. I had worked with their logistics coordinator for 8 years. I knew that their dock scheduling required at least 10 days' notice for multi-site deliveries, that their internal approval chain for any order over $200,000 required sign-off from their VP of Operations, and that their VP of Operations took every last Friday of the month completely off the grid. These were not things in any system. They were in my head because I had paid attention. She did not know any of this. The first sign of trouble came on a Wednesday afternoon in the 3rd week of August. I was at my desk, the support function desk, smaller, no window, when I heard raised voices near the back conference room. Not unusual. But then my phone rang. It was the logistics coordinator at our supplier. He was calling me directly, even though technically I was no longer the contact on the account. "Hey," he said. "I don't want to step on anyone's toes here, but I've been getting emails about this hospital delivery schedule, and I have to be honest with you. Some of these dates aren't going to work. I asked him to walk me through it. The new delivery schedule had been built without accounting for the dock notice window. 3 of the 6 sites had been assigned delivery dates that fell within 7 days of the order confirmation. One of the deliveries had been scheduled for a Friday, the last Friday of the month. The order total across all 6 sites was well over $200,000, and there was no record of VP sign-off in the system. I thanked him, told him I'd look into it, and sat with that information for about 45 seconds. Then I went back to my email and waited. I want to be clear about something. I am not a vindictive person. I did not want the contract to fail. I did not want the hospital network to be affected. What I wanted, what I decided, sitting at that smaller desk with no window, was to let the people who had made these decisions experience the full weight of those decisions before I said a word. Not because I was angry, though I was. Because I was tired of being the person who quietly fixed things in the background so that other people's mistakes never became visible. 17 years of that. It was enough. The situation escalated faster than I think anyone expected. By Thursday morning, the supplier's logistics coordinator had escalated internally, and our account was flagged for a hold pending schedule resolution. My manager's assistant knocked on my door just after 9. Could I join a call? I joined the call. There were 6 people on it. My manager. Her. 2 people from the hospital network's project team, the logistics coordinator, and me. The person in the support function, the one with the historical vendor relationships. She had a slide ready. She pulled it up on screen. It had a timeline on it. It had a process flow. It had, I will say, excellent font choices. The logistics coordinator said, very politely, that the timeline on the slide did not match the delivery windows his company could actually accommodate. He said this twice. She explained the slide again. He said he understood the slide, but that the physical reality of dock scheduling did not align with the slide. My manager said, "Let's align on a path forward." The hospital network project manager said, and I am quoting him directly, "We have a contractual milestone in 22 days. Is that happening or not? Silence. My manager looked at her. She looked at her slide. The slide did not answer. He looked at me. I said I had spoken with the logistics coordinator the previous afternoon and had some notes, if that would be helpful. The path forward took 40 minutes to work out. It required calling the VP of operations on his cell, a number I had, and getting his verbal approval on a modified order structure that kept the total under the threshold requiring formal sign-off. It required shifting 2 delivery sites to dates I knew the dock could accommodate. It required me to personally call the facilities coordinator at the 3rd site to confirm they could receive a slightly earlier delivery. The hospital network project manager said, "Thank you," in a tone that made clear he understood exactly what had just happened and who had just handled it. After the call, my manager sent me a Slack message. "Nice work today," like I had done something unexpected, like competence was a surprise. I did not respond. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with my manager and his manager, the VP of operations, who had been at the company for 26 years and who I had worked alongside on 3 major contract negotiations. He had a way of sitting very still when he was thinking. He was sitting very still. My manager had prepared a slide deck for the meeting. Of course he had. The VP looked at the deck for about 30 seconds, then put it face down on the table and looked at me. He asked me to walk him through what had happened with the hospital network contract. I walked him through it. All of it, not just the August call, the restructuring, the role change, the 17 years, the nature of supplier relationships that do not live in any database. I spoke for about 12 minutes evenly without raising my voice. I had spent 17 years being professional, and I was going to be professional now even if it killed me. The VP asked my manager 2 questions. The first was how long the new procurement lead had been in her role. The second was whether he had consulted anyone with existing supplier relationships before restructuring the team. My manager began a sentence with, "We felt it was important to bring in fresh perspective." The VP said, "I'm going to stop you there." What happened next took about 3 weeks to fully unfold. I will tell you the relevant parts. My role was restored, not as support function, as Senior Director of Supplier Relations, a title that had not existed before and was created specifically to formalize what I had always actually been doing, with a salary adjustment that I will not specify, but that was, let me say, significant. She was moved to a different team, not fired. Moved to a role in vendor analytics that was, genuinely, probably better suited to what she actually knew how to do. The irony is that she might actually be good at it. I do not know. I do not particularly care. My manager had a series of conversations with the VP that I was not present for. His title did not change. Some other things changed. The kind of things that don't show up on an org chart, but that everyone in an office building understands. I got my old desk back. The one with the window. On my first morning back, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to the logistics coordinator in Pittsburgh. The second was to the operations lead at our freight carrier. The third was to the owner's daughter at our steel supplier, just to check in. She asked how things were going. I told her, better now. People ask me sometimes if I regret not speaking up sooner, not fighting harder when the restructuring happened, not walking into my manager's office and laying out exactly what I knew and why it mattered. Here's what I tell them. I spent 17 years being the person who fixed things quietly, who smoothed things over, who knew when to step back and let the process work. I don't regret knowing when to be quiet. What I was done with, what I decided in that bathroom in February, standing over the sink, was being quiet on behalf of people who had decided I wasn't worth listening to. There's a difference between patience and invisibility. I had been patient. I was done being invisible. The hospital network contract closed on time, all 6 sites. The client sent a note to our CEO. He forwarded it to the VP, who forwarded it to me with one line, "This is what 17 years looks like." I printed it out. It's on my wall, next to the window. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened. Not the call, not the meeting, not the moment the VP put the slide deck face down on the table. I mean what happened underneath all of it. The slow, quiet accumulation of choices, mine and theirs, that made that outcome inevitable. Here's what I know now: nobody gets away with anything permanently. Not because the universe is watching, not because there's some ledger being kept somewhere, but because the real world has a way of testing every assumption eventually. My manager assumed that relationships could be replaced with frameworks, that years of trust could be swapped out for a fresher perspective and a better-looking dashboard, that I would keep quietly fixing things even after I'd been told, politely and professionally, that my way of doing things was obsolete. Every one of those assumptions got tested. Every one of them failed. Not because I made them fail, because reality did. And I think about her too, the one who took my accounts. I don't hold anything against her, genuinely. She walked into a situation that was set up to make her look capable while making me look unnecessary, and she believed it, the same way most of us believe the story we're handed when it works in our favor. She didn't know what she didn't know. That's not malice, that's inexperience. The hard part about inexperience is that you can't see it from the inside. You only find out where the edges are when you fall off one. What I carried out of all of this, what I'd tell anyone sitting in that smaller desk with no window, is that your actual value and your perceived value are two completely different things, and for a long time, you may have to be okay with that gap existing. Not forever, but for longer than feels fair. I was perceived as legacy, as overhead, as someone whose knowledge lived in her head instead of a system which apparently made it less real. The fact that that knowledge was also what kept a $40 million operation running was not visible to the people who had decided not to look at it. That's the trap, I think. When you're good at your job, you make it look easy. And when things look easy, people start to wonder if they need you to do it at all. The answer to that is not to start making things look harder. It's to let the moment come, the one where it becomes undeniable, and to be steady enough to still be standing when it does. I was steady. Not because I was fearless. I was scared, honestly, through most of it. I was scared in February when I heard the word restructuring. I was scared in that bathroom. I was scared on the call when I could feel my manager looking at me and I knew exactly what was about to happen. But I had spent 17 years building something real, and real things hold. That's the only thing I knew for certain. Real things hold. The VP said something to me later that I think about sometimes. He said, "The problem with people who are truly good at something is that they're usually the last ones to argue for their own value." I didn't say anything back. But I thought, yeah, that ends now.